they figured perhaps that would be curative.
All right. Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the
lo and
Mushroom Mansion
behold, you
Taos,
give
New Mexico,
LSD, people,
working on an oil
go
painting
through hell
cane.
and they stop drinking.
All right. Today,
So
I am going to
may
place
not,
in the
be that
first
there's a
of the
specific,
background
kind
surrounding elements, which I guess I should give a
psychotherapy
brief
is
rundown as to
important.
how that's going to work.
And
They're
psychotherapy
going to
may
be
not
sort of
be
fish-eyed
necessary at all.
and spinning
So
around
future DMT work.
the eclipsed sun.
One of
So
the
right here,
drawbacks of
I'm going to have
just
the
one
gallows,
dose of DMT is that it's
a
not
vaguely
fast.
Trumpish
And by the
figure
time you're
hanging
orienting yourself
next
in
to a
that speech,
vaguely
you're coming down.
Putin figure hanging
So Andrew
next to
Gallimore
a
in
vaguely
Japan and I,
Kim Jong
we wrote a
figure
paper
hanging,
in 2016
and then maybe an
maybe.
audience here, and that will be kind of lit
You're
behind,
proposing a continuous
silhouetted.
infusion of DMT.
So they're going to
You
go
kind
on
of
with
like
a
anesthesia.
strictly
And,
Prussian blue and
it
black
would be,
mixture.
great
It's just
for
kind
a
of
couple
dangling
reasons. One is
the
that it would be
masses.
really
They won't be very
excellent
distinctive.
psychotherapy.
And then we'll go from there.
Because you can go in and out of the state, just turning up or down the dial.
Right there.
Because you return to your baseline within 15 minutes of the drug being injected. So you can work on things psychologically with your therapist. You could say, I want to go in this deep, or I really want to go for it, or I don't want to go for it for another half hour or so. You would have great control over the acute altered state. Also, you could characterize the state much more carefully. You could figure out on a better means of interacting with the beings, for example. And on another specific area that I think is especially relevant to DMT is that if it is released in the brain in the dying animal, it may be able to produce a dry run of the near-death experience. So that's probably going to be work that will begin with the terminally ill, perhaps, or even healthy people who want to gain experience with perhaps an NDE-like state before they have to. So 5-methoxy-DMT, either pure, synthesized in the laboratory, or from the venom of a toad from the Sonoran Desert. It's also endogenous, to mammals, but it's not been characterized as well as DMT. It isn't orally active; it's quite short-acting. It's more typical in producing the white light, the ego death, formless state than DMT. It's easy to overdose on, and that's perhaps why people report more frequent flashbacks with 5-methoxy than with DMT. So we were talking about the huge variety of conditions that seem to respond to psychedelics. And that's led me to suggest that maybe psychedelics are super placebos. They are like panaceas. You want this to occur, and this occurs. You don't want that to occur, and that doesn't occur. Enhancement. Sorry, there's another typo. So if that's the case, if the set and the setting, if the person, their intent, why they're volunteering, and the conditions, the circumstances in which they're receiving the drug are so powerful in determining the outcome, then that points to a placebo effect. If that's the case, then conditions that are known to respond to placebo may be especially responsive to psychedelics. Inflammatory conditions, immune conditions, things like asthma, irritable bowel. Depression is quite placebo responsive. Things like cancer, which are not especially placebo sensitive, probably wouldn't respond quite as robustly. And if it is the case that the placebo effect is going on, and the placebo effect is real. There's all kinds of biological components, concomitants. There's endorphins, there's steroids, there's all kinds of objective measurements which point to an objective effect of placebo. It could be the case that the neurotrophic effects are the ones which would activate the placebo response, the marshaling of the body's innate healing mechanisms, both physiological and psychological. And you may not need a specific subjective experience then. So there's a lot of information that we still need to uncover. So let me veer into spirituality and psychedelics, which is a hot topic. And I think I will pause here for a moment. So spiritual experiences differ. Not all of them are the white light, ego dissolving kind of state. Another kind, which was kind of a description of the DMT experience, could be called interactive and relational. There's content, you maintain your sense of self, you interact with it. And it could occur, and spiritual experiences can take place either within a traditional religious setting or outside of one. But phenomenologically, they are the same. It's just that one might be called Christian and one might be called nature-based, for example. If you're not a spiritual person, or if you're not a religious person. The states on themselves, though, if you gave a questionnaire, would be identical. The interactive relational state, as I mentioned, full of content, you maintain your sense of self. There's a continuation of time and space, even though it's a bit unusual, but still it isn't a timeless moment, or there's no space at all. The certainty of the experience is striking, and that's what's one of the characteristics of the DMT effect as well, which is the sense that what one is witnessing is more real than real. The mood effects aren't always ecstatic, but usually there's the feeling of awe or reverence. And it's full of information, often verbal, as opposed to wordless. The mystical unitive state, there's a dissolving of the sense of the separate self. It's empty of content. There's merging in unity rather than boundaries and interaction. There's a transcendence of time and space. Time stops, space disappears. The one thing they share is the conviction of things being more real than real, and it's non-verbal. The term often used is ineffable. So spiritual experiences can be interactive, relational, or mystical unitive, and they can occur in a religious or non-religious environment. So Buddhism and the psychedelics, I mentioned that I studied, trained in Zen Buddhism. That was the religious, spiritual scaffolding I brought to my DMT work. And I have been involved with the Zen community for quite a long time, since my 20s. And because of my interest in meditation and psychedelics, I was curious as to the motivations and the experiences that the monks, the junior monks, possessed before they became monks. What kind of psychedelic experiences did they have? Did they have them? Whenever I would get alone with one of the junior monks, who were all in their 20s, like I was. I asked them if they had ever taken LSD, and I'd say everyone did. And when I asked them how important their LSD experiences were to becoming a monk, it was important to pretty much all of them. So instead of the unpredictability, the weirdness, the time-limited nature of the drug state, they decided to pursue the vision or the flash of another way of looking and interacting with the world through Zen, Buddhism, a monastic life, rather than taking psychedelics. And one of the most important stages in one's Buddhist training is bodhicitta, the first flash of enlightenment. It's the first flash that things are different than how they seem. And that was the effect of LSD, which then prompted these young adults to become monks. And there's also some more current research which demonstrates that in a Zen retreat, psilocybin increases the effects of meditation. So the state of the DMT effect was not the white light kensho of Zen Buddhism anyway. If I had trained in the Tibetan stream, I may have approached the effects of my DMT work or the results of it differently. It would have been more consistent because there's a lot of visual imagery, visualizations, interaction with spiritual levels of existence in the Tibetan tradition. But there isn't, strictly speaking, in Soto Zen. So I looked for other spiritual models or other religious models and stumbled upon the prophetic state, as I call it, as described in the Hebrew Bible. Most people think of prophecy as foretelling or predicting, but that's not really the case. There's a hierarchy and a continuum and certain criteria before prophecy. And only a small amount of the criteria has to do with foretelling. It's instead any spiritual experience that's described in the text. Moses burning bush, Jeremiah and the burning pot, Daniel and his rivers of fire. Even inspiration, the Psalms were written in the spirit of prophecy. Strength, Samson, that was a prophetic experience. But if you look at the phenomenology of the visions and the voices and the psychedelic kinds of full-blown stuff, if you compare the DMT and the prophetic state, they overlap strikingly with respect to their phenomenology. The visions, the voices. If you read the first chapter of Ezekiel, with the spinning wheels and the angels with eyes on their backs and the lightning and the roar, and Ezekiel falls down, he loses strength, the angel grabs him by the hair and takes him into outer space. That sounds pretty DMT-like. So it comported, it was more consistent with the results of my DMT study than the mystical unitive state. What is the tradition that devolves from an interactive relational spiritual experience? It provides an alternative, to the mystical unitive, spiritual religious, New Age structure. To the extent that prophecy and DMT share phenomenology, there might be overlapping biology. In other words, is elevated brain DMT responsible for the visions of Ezekiel? So, this is a bit. Oh, okay. So, I condensed a lot of material in this slide here. if you want to learn more about the model, I wrote a book in 2014 called DMT and the Soul of Prophecy. And it both describes why I started studying the Hebrew Bible as an alternative model to Buddhism. And also it's a painstaking comparison of the two states. And I conclude that there's a lot of phenomenology overlap between the voices. But the content is strikingly strikingly different. Prophecy, Jeremiah, the whole Hebrew Bible has a lot of information in it, as opposed to the DMT state, about which the most one can say with any level of sophistication is it exists. This is what it looks like. This is the way it feels in my body, or lack of body. These are the emotions. But the content wasn't all that striking. They were mostly resolution of personal issues, professional. So that once again bespeaks the relevance of calling these drugs psychedelic. Their mind disclosing, mind manifesting. So the character of the prophet in the Bible is distinct from a research volunteer who was coming from a completely different place. And then I speculate about naturally occurring DMT playing a role in the visions, but not the intellectual or cognitive content. There's a lot of interest in plants in the Hebrew Bible. Are there examples of people smoking things or eating things that could cause the visions? But there's not really. And the existence of naturally occurring DMT in the brain makes it really unnecessary to look for an exogenous source. So, back to the present day and age, there is a tsunami of interest in psychedelics. Once again, there's a huge amount of interest in capitalizing their effects in any number of models. Mostly the medicalization, depression, stroke, brain damage, any number of other conditions, other circumstances, wellness. So it's also the result of all of my peers who were in their 20s in the 1960s, coming to power. So there is a lot more interest and a lot more acceptance of the validity of the psychedelic experience. The media is much friendlier. There's decriminalization movements across the country, rescheduling movements, conferences, workshops, in progressive causes. So I think it's important to not figure that it's game over, that things will just be perfect now for the psychedelic movement. On the contrary, there's Fox News. Don't forget them. And if anything goes bad with psychedelics, prepare for the backlash. Let's say there's a new Charles Manson who crawls out from under some rock and convinces his followers to become serial killers. And they point to LSD or psilocybin as catalyzing those thoughts and behaviors. And there are going to be adverse effects, especially in less controlled circumstances. Suicides, for example, psychosis that ends up in emergency rooms, psychiatric units, and jails. So we don't want to glorify the benefits. We want to be clear-eyed in talking about what's going on, what's curative, what are the mechanisms, and also we ought to be clear-eyed about the risk than the adverse effects. So if we've been sweeping or minimizing the adverse effects, then they start to crop up. The media is going to say, why didn't you tell us about these adverse effects? So I don't think you want to become a zealot. You want to, if you can anyway, in academics, maintain some rigor. So malignant uses that would be Charles Manson and his ilk. Okay, so that's pretty much that. Let me take questions from the class, and I hope you enjoy the lecture.
That's a song we can all relate to this time of year. Spring's about to spring. Persephone's coming back. And here in Sicily, the ice is groaning, about to break with that exquisite and deafening roar. It's a time for madness. A time for our fangs to come down and our eyes to glaze over so that the beast in us can sing with unmitigated joy. Oh yes, ecstasy, I welcome thee.
All right, so that gets a little mob around a little gallows and a few politicians dangling from ropes. That's by no means finished. Got a long ways to go on all of the scenes that will develop around that as well, but that's the first roughed in, and I kind of like the placement. It's pretty decent. So that's it for the moment. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Cain. First scene revolving around the eclipse. Have a good day, Earth.